know. Be still and know. Be still and know. Be still and know.
To what extent did learning about the Race Massacre like influence, let's say, your passion for investing and why you think, you know, it is in and of itself an equalizer and a way for people to like gain wealth and sort of regain the prominence that we once had?
My thing was like, how's wealth created? Because we had it, what happened to it, and how do we get it back? Like, how can you have this stuff and then not be here, and nobody's been able to figure out in 100 years, or by the time I was growing up, 80 years or so, no one's figured out how to like fix it or return it. So I think that's what interested me in finance, is to figure out like how is wealth created, and that became investing, and that kind of like informed my theory of how Black generation wealth is created and should be sustained.
I remember one of my professors right around that same time asking a really poignant question about the civil rights movement, and he was asking whether or not the civil rights movement was a failure. And by and large, everybody was like, of course not. No, we wouldn't be here. And he was like, well, maybe it wasn't a failure, but from an economic standpoint, like we've gained and made progress in legislation, in education, in access, arguably, let's say even healthcare or access to healthcare. But like that seems to be like the last thing where we really have not made progress, and in a lot of ways have declined. And you could argue that the decline is accelerating. So all of that to say, we've got a lot of educators. We've got a lot of people, you know what I mean, in public office, maybe not enough, you know what I mean? But there just aren't enough people who can actually fund change.
Yeah. And can build wealth in a way that is sustainable and generative, like that is focused on community and group economics, that understands the power that comes with money and not just the things, the stuff you can buy with it. Like what it means in this culture, in this nation, to have money is to also have power. And so having people who have the wherewithal and the foresight to be like, you know, once I get wealthy, I'm gonna do it differently than the examples that I've seen before me where they just use it to destroy or to hoard. I'm going to do it to make the world better for my children or my grandchildren.
Right. I don't think it's Tulsa specific, but I think most people make the connection between wealth and power. I think in Tulsa we're conditioned, and I've fallen victim to this as well, where in Tulsa specifically, when you make it, you leave. And that there wasn't anything here for us. Like, a lot of people are looking at Tulsa now. This was not the Tulsa that I grew up in. This is not the Tulsa that existed when I was here. There's so many new things and buildings that people are like, oh, why don't you stay here? I'm like, there was nothing here. This was a dirt road before you got here 2 years ago, right? But I think that's the part that's suffering now, is that, you know, whether you call it the most successful group or what have you, a lot of them moved to Dallas, I mentioned earlier, or New York, or Atlanta, or LA. I fell for that too, right? I felt at the point in time in high school, like I have to go away to college and become something and then come back and like help, right?
I know Tulsa's actually doing quite a bit to try to attract people back, right? Can you speak about that a little bit? And what do you think about some of the incentives that they're offering to entice people to move back to Tulsa?
Yeah, I think initially I was really excited about the initiatives. There are some that will pay you, Tulsa Remote I think is the name of one of them, where they'll pay you $10,000 or some significant sum of money for you to come here and work and get a stipend. So buy property, start a business. A lot of the Black-owned businesses that you see now were a result of transplants who came here and took advantage of those opportunities. So I think those are exciting because, again, you know, the bookstore we're at, some of the other places we may visit may not have existed had those programs not been here. So I think that's a really important point. But the other end of it is, what about the people who have been here? And as things continue to develop, will it benefit those who have been here through the struggle, right? or will they be pushed out further north and it become gentrified and become what Harlem is becoming now in other black communities, right? So I think there has to be balance where new people who are willing to come here and take a risk to move to Tulsa are compensated, but also the people who are here that are customers that have been trying to do things without all those tools also need to be fairly compensated as
and
well.
protected.
Yeah.
Like, this is home for them. It's not, it's a really interesting dynamic, and one that we're seeing. We talked about it in our Atlanta episode where, transplants are basically practicing geoarbitrage. They're taking their equity and home values that were earned in high cost of living and applying that to lower cost of living, which has a number of trickle effects to local businesses as well as homeowners. But it's a really interesting, when you think about the culture of America, is that what we want? Do we want people sort of bouncing around and using geography as a means to build wealth? I mean, that has been our story. That's the story of the gold rush. That's the story of, indigenous people's lands being taken. But that's a very risky tactic because, to your point, it pushes out those who have made a home there, because they can't afford it.